So here's the thing about me. I have loved to read my entire life. I'm like the only one in my family who does. My husband doesn't love reading, and my 4 boys do not love reading, but I always have. But here's what I've learned. You've all heard the saying, readers are leaders, and I can tell you that's absolutely true. The funny thing is I, read books and listen to podcasts and stuff. What I always hear a lot of the same phrases that I know. I've heard them for years because I read them in a book. And what's interesting is that these people are using the same phrases and oftentimes teaching the same things, aren't doing it because they're copycatting each other. Is copycatting a word? We're going to say it is. But because they're learning those principles that come from books. I'm not saying you have to read 1,000,000 books a year, but if you take that time to read, 10 minutes a day, I've heard, 1 page a day, I've heard. Some people are 1 chapter a day. Some people like me have to be cut off. Like I read 30 minutes in the morning and then I'm done because I could sit there with a book and read all day. So if you are taking the time to read, you are going to automatically learn things in this business. Now, a couple things to point out. Number one, it's reading the right things, okay? So if you have a kid and you're reading a kid's book with them, are you reading a book? Yes. Does that count? No. Now, again, I gave a very weird, crazy example to get the point across, but the idea is if you're reading, a fiction novel, that's probably not teach you anything about business or how to grow or how to, know people's personality types or any of the things that we can learn in the real estate business to help us and to help our clients. Another thing is that you need to make sure that you schedule time to read it. So especially if you don't love reading. So whether it's like that 5 minutes a day or like I said, my cutoff time, you need to schedule that time to read it. It can even be, if you want to show up to a showing 15 minutes early so that you can read, your once a day time. That's great too. Whatever works for you, just have a plan and stick with that. One way I think to find the right book, so to speak, is by referral. So not necessarily like through friends and family, but if you have a favorite podcast that you're listening to or a favorite author and you're reading their book, oftentimes within these books, they'll name other books that they have used as reference or that help them. Or if you're listening to a podcast or watching a video, they might name different books that have helped them in whatever area. And I always keep a list. I actually have a list in a notebook of all the different books I want to read. And I will go through and buy books all the time. And because I like to read, usually I will get through them. But I often have several sitting around, one in my car, etc. So by knowing that you're going to read a book that will help you, it's often good to find that referral from somebody else who you like what they're teaching. So that would be my one piece of advice there. My second piece of advice regarding books seems like it would be really obvious, but yet it's kind of not, or it's just a lesson I haven't learned, and that is do what it says. I cannot tell you how many times I've read a book and wanted to implement something in it and didn't because it seemed too hard. I tried it once and didn't do it. I forgot about it. I would say there is more I don't implement than what I do. What I do implement has helped me a lot, and that's kind of a negative of being a reader like me who just loves to read because you get almost content overload and that you don't implement it. But my point is you need to read, but that's not enough. You also need to implement it. So that would be my second step. My first step would be read books from somebody who, is a source that you trust in terms of, like your career and your business. So if they're saying this is a good book to read about knowing how to interact with clients and their personality types, I would absolutely take that book and read it. If they say this is a good book to read about, scheduling, I would read that book. If they say this is a good book about confidence and it's someone that knows their stuff and you trust them in terms of professionally, then I would read that book, or at least make a list and kind of work your way through that. Second piece of advice would be, again, to make sure that you're implementing some of what you read. Even if it's just, hey, there were 10 ideas here in this book that were great, I'm going to implement 3. That's good. Because let me tell you, if you don't implement it, you're just going to be frustrated because these are good ideas and you're not doing them. But if you can implement part of the book, a few pieces of advice, those little things can make a huge difference. Here's an example. We were on our honeymoon, 1998, and we were in, toward the end of our honeymoon, we were in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. We were walking downtown. We came to this bookstore, and I grabbed a book. I forget what it was called. Something about being a wife. Oh my goodness, I cannot remember. I have no idea. I still have the book. It's on my bookshelf. But what I wanted to say was that it had all these different tips of, what you could do to be a wife, which sounds really weird, but just roll with me on this. But one of the things that it said that I implemented was a very, very, very tiny, tiny thing, but 25 years later, we still do this in our house, and it really is helpful, is I'm going to use Walmart bags as an example. Take the bags, take like 4 or 5 or 6, put 4 or 5 in the bottom of your trash can, like let's say your bathroom trash or a hallway trash or an office trash. And on top of that, you put the one Walmart bag. So when it's full, you tie it up, you throw it out, and there's already 3 or 4 in there, and you can use one of those, and it makes it easy to quickly, no mess, change the trash. One tiny little thing that I've implemented all of these years, my kids know it, they implement it, and it is actually a really easy thing that has helped us to make sure we always have trash bags in those areas. How do I know it works? Because we don't do that for our kitchen, and sometimes we're really bad. Myself and the boys are bad about, taking the trash out and not putting a new bag in the kitchen. But guess what? We never do that in the laundry room. We never do that in the bathrooms. We don't do that in the office, because we have those bags already there under there, and it's super easy to switch out. So that was one little tiny, almost ridiculous idea in terms of bigness, so to speak, that I adopted and used in our house, and it has been a really awesome lifesaver. So that is just a little tip there. And the last thing I would tell you is, and this is just personal preference, there are lots of different ways to read a book. Of course, you can read the hard copy or paper copy. You can read it on a Kindle. You can hear Audible, whatever you want to do. Personally, I love to have the actual physical book. I love to highlight it. I love to refer back to it. That's really helpful for me. I know that my husband said you can highlight on Kindles, and I've done that. I feel like I just can't retrieve it as well as like flipping through the physical book. Now, for sure, if I'm getting on an airplane, it's kind of a pain because, you can't take 3 books with you to read. In fact, we went on a cruise. I bought 2 kind of like low-key relaxing books. They were just autobiographies. Well, they were so good. I finished them in like 3 days. And then I was like, what the heck am I going to read these last couple of days? So I love to get up in the morning and go out to the, by the pool or overlook the ocean and sit there and read. So when you have the physical book, for sure, it can be a pain and different things like that. But for me, that's my preference. But I would just say, whatever your preference is, mark it up, use a highlighter, take notes. I think that's an easy way to reference things quickly, to maybe show something to your kids or a coworker, or, a friend that you think they'd find helpful because it's all highlighted up and it's right there. And also easy for you to implement those 1 or 2 things we talked about. So those are my tips on reading, why it's important, and kind of like how to make the best of it, or make the best use out of it. So I hope that helped. The one thing I want to do here is I want to start giving you guys more books to read. I have a ton of books, and since I'm not a library person, just because I mark the crap out of them, and I am a physical book person, we have a ton of books. And I tell my little boys, I'm like, I'm kicking you out of your room. Like, we'll go put you in the other bedroom, because I want to have an office at home that's just lined with, shelves and shelves and shelves of books, of the books that I have. So that is kind of like my thing. And so there's oftentimes books I think of as I'm thinking of items to share with you that a book could make a good reference to. So what I'm going to do is, at the end of each episode, I'm going to make sure there's a link to a book that will be helpful to whatever we are going to be learning that day, or what I'm going to be teaching you. So the nice part about that is that could be helpful reference. The bad part about that is that, every week you're going to get a new book recommendation to read. The other, I guess, bad part is that there are going to be some weeks that what I'm suggesting you read could be kind of a stretch for what we're actually learning about, but I'm trying to kind of implement something. So just bear with me as we kind of figure this out. But I just think that books are so important. They've helped me learn so much. I came into this business, parents were in business. My dad did own several businesses, and every one of them failed. So instead of having that, business background of seeing what a successful business looks like and kind of having that head start, I was terrified of business because I had watched my family. We had no money. It was always tight. Like we were poor. And so while there was certainly love in the house, the idea of owning a business like I do owning a brokerage now terrified me. But then as I grew and, got into real estate and started learning everything else, it made me comfortable with that. But my point being that I know that you all have different backgrounds that you're coming from. So some might read a ton, some might not. So I'm going to try to implement the books that have helped me over the years to go from, no business background, teaching certificate, starting to sell real estate, now owning a brokerage, kind of that progression. And one thing that helped me with that was learning from books. Because remember, I have a special education degree. I do not have a business background or a business degree. So I'm going to link those. Forgive me if they're kind of a stretch. Not going to link a book today, although I might just pick one that I like, that I enjoy, that I know you can learn from. We'll have to see what I decide to do. But that's what I wanted to share with you, that just remember, readers are leaders. And I know that sounds cliche. I know you've heard it before. If you're not a reader, you probably think that it's crazy, but it's true. Listen to the steps I say in terms of how to do it. And I promise you will get bored a lot if you're not a reader, but you will pick up some nuggets that can really help you. And I hope you have a great day.